My sobriety is under.
Good evening, good evening.
Hello, Dr. Jones.
Hey there. I was so excited when I saw your name.
Hey.
I'm just letting people in. I know I try to give at least a 3 to 5 minute grace period.
Okay.
I'm admitting everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Right. Hey there, Dr. Henderson.
How are you this evening?
I'm pretty good.
How's your family?
Everyone is well,
Good, good.
I think we friends on Facebook, right?
Yes.
So you probably saw my post. Like them
Yes, I did.
and that 17-year-old. Also have to remember, like I remember age of 15, I gave my mom hell. So
Oh, yes.
payback is something else. But they still pretty good. I think, we'll probably talk about that at some point in time between now and the end of this week during our training about, potential. Because a lot of times I see potential as being something dangerous, but as educators, for the most part, I'm not necessarily sure who are all educators who are part of this training, but I hear it too often that, educators say, why would you do something, especially when something goes wrong? Like, why would you do something like that? I see your potential. And I think we really have to take a step back and think about the meaning of telling a student or anyone that we see their potential, because I feel as if we're not humanizing the person that's in front of us. And we can also set everyone up for failure when we're trying to get them to a place where they should be without focusing on where they are right now. So, the same thing I'm telling educators, the same thing I'm telling parents, I see their potential because they my children, my expectations may be a little different for them, and it might be set a little high. So yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We'll get started probably if you need water, go to the bathroom, stretch, talk to your boo thing for a quick minute. I don't know, whatever that may be. Feel free to do so. I'm trying to give people at least till 5:35 because I know what it's like to, especially in the evening, and the dedication that everyone is taking, but I also want to respect everyone's time too. So we're going to cover a lot between now and the end of the week. I see one of my former students in here. She's super cool. All right, let's see. Hey there, Tabitha.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to see you.
Thanks. I'm really excited about this.
I feel like this might be a refresher for you.
Maybe. I mean, now that I've graduated, I just feel like this is a really good thing to have under my belt and have more exposure to. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yes, ma'am. And forgive me, guys. I don't know what I got going on this evening, but I've been snacking today. I'm not big on snacking, but today I am. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. what I want to be able to do is to just open up with a few words of encouragement, even a prayer. And hopefully that doesn't offend anyone, but I am at the point in my life that everything that I do, good, not so good, and indifferent, I'm going to pray about it. So, and Father, we thank you for bringing us here together this evening for the next few days to participate in and actively participate in this Restorative Justice one-on-one course. I pray that you have your way and that you guide our steps and our minds to be open to the process, and then also be able to be very transparent and open about what this process may consist of for each individual. So Lord, we thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So let's get started. Look, I want everybody to understand I'm not an uptight person. I'm very, I call myself being fun. It may not always feel that way. I'm very open. I am transparent. And I don't want this to feel like a training. I really want this to be more of a discussion and me just being able to facilitate the conversation about what is restorative justice and what it means to me, what it means to be, in the world of education or a field of education. What does this feel and look like in our homes? Oftentimes when we think of the term restorative justice, if you ever heard the term before, your mind typically navigates to the criminal, the opposite of what the criminal justice system may look like in terms of juvenile and criminal justice system, or moving away from zero tolerance policies in school, which we know, based off research and the numbers, we've seen that zero tolerance policies do not work. So what I want to start off with is just being able to do our introductions. And I'm going to go in the order of the way I see you on my Zoom screen. I always feel like this is, what's the old show, The Brady Bunch. I think this is just the day and age we live in now. And so I'll be totally honest with you. I've gotten so used to using Zoom in this last year that when someone like, hey, Doc, let's get on, let's talk about something real quick. I'm like, okay, let me send you the Zoom link. Duh, we could just pick up the phone. So just forgive me. So I want to start with one of my favorite people, which she may not know, but I love her. I love her dearly. And she helped me navigate a position that I had at one of my former institutions and has been very powerful and helpful in navigating that process. So I want to start with the future Dr. Robertson.
Oh, I still miss you every day. My name is Tiffany Robertson. I am, what all do you want us to say?
Whatever you let say.
Okay. I am the Associate Director of Admissions at Governor State University. I'm also an adjunct faculty member there. And as Dr. Jones just mentioned, I am a doctoral candidate as well. So my intention is to stay in higher ed. So I just want to, and Dr. Jones has done a presentation or two for me about restorative justice to my class. And so I figure I need more of that. So that is why I'm here.
Truly appreciative. Thank you. Mr. Gary Neal Sr. And keep in mind, I'm only calling names by the way I see them on my screen. Some people I don't. But how are you, sir?
Good evening, Sister Jones. I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Neal, Dr. Gary Neal, actually. I am a retired Elgin, Illinois police sergeant. Retired back in 2015, currently residing in Florida now. Prior to retiring from the police department, I started a nonprofit called Simply Redeemed, which was an adult reentry and juvenile diversion program. And prior to moving, we lasted about 5 years. I'm also a pastor here. Been licensed and ordained for about 17 years. And one of my favorite ministries and my passionate ministries is with you. And so I've been involved in restorative justice for about 30 years now. And so anytime I get a chance to participate in programs like this and in initiatives such as this, I just like to learn little tidbits as much as I can get to see what I can do to help. Leadership never stops. And so there's just some things you retire from, some things you don't. So I'm looking forward to the program for the next few days. I'm off right now on knee surgery now, so I got nothing but time. So this was a good way to spend some time in the evening. So thank you guys for having me tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Dr. Stacy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Stacy Henderson. I am a retired naval officer, and currently I'm the senior naval science instructor at Bloom High School in Chicago Heights. So basically, I teach Navy JROTC. The age group I have primarily are sophomores and seniors, and occasionally I am engaged with freshmen and juniors. Again, I'm retired military. I spent a little over 20 years in the Navy, and I've been teaching ROTC now about 5 years. So, and I'm very interested in social restorative justice, especially because I'm dealing with young people. So I'm really excited about the next few days of training. So thank you so much, Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. I appreciate you. I didn't know you were over at Bloom. That's great.
Yes, yes. I love it there.
I can only imagine. Thank you. Tabitha.
Hi, I'm Tabitha, and I just graduated with my master's degree in counseling, and I was accepted into a doctoral program for counselor education and supervision. I'm here just because, like it was mentioned before, like, you know, I want to keep educating myself on this, especially because I hope that my future does include teaching future counselors and also leadership roles. So I think that this is something that's very important, just as a foundation. So any chance I get, I try to gather as much knowledge as possible. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I'm proud of you, Tabitha. I saw when you registered, I was like, there go my Tabitha. I'm very proud of you and congratulations. I know you got this.
Thank you.
Miss Carolyn.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
My technology sometimes is wonky. I'm Carolyn Neal, and I am a retired public school teacher in Portland, Oregon, and began some equity work, probably close to 2 decades ago with Glenn Singleton. And restorative justice in our district was always kind of on the fringe. It was kind of separated from what was going on in the classroom and the building. And so I'm here to just learn more. I'm doing some work with Dr. Amanda Kemp and on racial healing, and working with white people doing something, an amazing group on Facebook, and just excited about my next chapter in life as I try to figure out being retired, and very grateful to be retired in this virtual situation. I finished out 35 years with 1/4 of virtual, and that was enough. So here to learn.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here, Miss Carolyn. Appreciate you.
Good.
Miss Jamise.
Hello, how are you, Dr. Jones? How have you been?
I'm good, and you?
I'm wonderful. I cannot complain at all.
Yes,
So my name is Jamise Cluggett. I have worked in restorative justice, which is how I met Dr. Jones. And also we go to the same church. But I also currently work as a case manager in reentry for Kankakee County. And I've played various roles throughout the community and trying to have my hand, and then, trying to help fundamentally change different things within our city. And I currently have a master's degree in business administration with a concentration in strategic leadership. So I'm looking forward to, applying everything that I learned here with, everything else that I do within the community and within the youth as well.
Yes, ma'am. Glad to see your face. And because, most of us, if we are connected, we're connected through social media. So we don't have an opportunity to see each other's faces. So this is a great opportunity. So thank you for being here. And yes, you are a faith mover. We're faith movers. So yes, I love it. Miss Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Karpuzes. I am a special educator in Portland, Oregon, like Carolyn, and I'm doing my educational admin certificate. And this past year, we've just been going into equity and all the barriers that are facing education right now. And I want to learn more about restorative justice. I know a little bit, and I'd like to become strong in it so I can, really become an advocate for those restorative justice practices and things like that. So I'm happy to be here, and I am on Pacific time, so technically I'm still working. I do have a couple of meetings and things like that this week, so I might be in and out a little bit of.
Understood. Actually, I overstand. I don't understand. I overstand. But I do truly thank you for being here and taking the time. And I thank everyone for taking the time. So thank you, Miss Stephanie. So we have 2 people from Oregon, and Dr. Neal is in Florida. That's pretty dope. Mr. Williams, Mr. Michael Williams. You on mute? There we
Yeah,
go.
I'm probably the least tech savvy person here with all this Zoom stuff. My name is Michael Williams. I'm the chair of mentoring with Save One Life Foundation. I am a retired juvenile justice / correctional officer from Illinois Department of Corrections. Did 6 years in the Marine Corps prior to that, growing up on the south side of Chicago. I've kind of seen full circle of what's happened with these young people over the last easily 2.5 decades of what's not being done. So I'm always looking to learn more and do more, especially, like I said, watching them come through the system and being thrown back out the back door just to come back again. So I'm here to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Miss Marion Jordan.
Hi, Marianne Jordan. I'm from Chicago. I am semi-retired. Came out of retired and started a business. It's a JMP Consulting Group. It's going fantastic. And I'm also the interim vice president at Kirby Rehab in Chicago in Roseland. And so I'm like a sponge. I'm constantly grasping new knowledge to be able to share with my colleagues, and so that they can incorporate it in programs within their organizations. And so I'm really excited to be a part of this. And thank you for accepting me into the program, Dr. Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an open invitation, and I'll share more before we continue after everyone else finish their introduction. But thank you, Ms. Jordan. I appreciate you. And semi-retired, that sound kind of dope.
It is. It is. It is.
Yes, ma'am. Miss Banks.
There we go. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm hanging in there. My name is Joy Banks, and I'm in Grandview, Missouri, in South Kansas City, Missouri. I am a discipline secretary for middle school. And actually, it's a middle school that I went to as a kid. And then I'm also the district president of one of the educators unions in the school district. And so I've taken this class so I can learn more, so I can get with my superintendent so we can kind of get some programs in place for the students as well as staff.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for your dedication. I see the NEA shirt on. I'm like, I see. That's dope. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Miss Andrews.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shakol Andrews, and I'm also a fellow NEA member. I am out of Ohio. I teach middle school currently in Painesville, Ohio. In my district, I have been the vice president, and I'm running for vice president again of my union, my local union. I am also the minority affairs chair for the district of NEOEA. And I am also on the OEA minority leadership team for our state. Very, very interested in restorative justice, restorative practices, try to follow restorative ways, not only with my students, but sometimes dealing with adults in my union capacity, when you have to restore those, the relationships that have been broken and whatnot. So I'm very interested in new forms of justice and different ways to look at discipline and things like that within our school system. So thank you very much, Ms. Jones, for having us this evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. You come with a wealth of knowledge as well in terms of how we can apply restorative justice, not just as what we do with our children as educators, but how is restorative justice seen as a way of life? So
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
yes, and my sis, last but not least, and I hope we had one person chime in, maybe she'll be back, but this is she's not my biological sister, and we have a backstory, but I love her dearly, and I'm truly admired to even see her. And you know, a lot of times when you do the work that you do, and when you see certain faces, like to know that we have a wealth of information and look at all the knowledge that is on this Zoom call, but knowing that you are here and you could be anywhere else, I almost feel like the club, you know, when a DJ like, you could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me. And so I'm truly appreciative. Dr. Tasha Davis.
You introduced me like I was a keynote speaker. I feel good. Thank you, especially coming from you. Well, I'm Dr. Tasha Davis. I'm the founder of an organization called Save One Life Foundation. We work with reentry youth, community youth, young people. Why I'm here today, sis, is really, I want to teach young people your model as a way of life. And so both you and Sister Andrews talked about, we really got to take this from theory to practice, to a way of life, and show young people, instead of all of us being on the phone trying to figure out how we can teach young people restorative justice. They need to know restorative justice as a way of life, how to repair some of this harm that's been done, that's continuously being done while they're growing. I mean, my favorite thing is that we're teaching and learning at the same time. And that's exactly what restorative justice seems to be. What I want to use your models to do is, when we have reentry circles, which we're about to start having, which is going to be with youth that are coming out of incarceration or having any touch with the justice system, are now living in the community with our young people who are in the high school. So there's no difference between the two. And really, it's just about repairing the harm that's been done and trying to catch up for what we all the time we've lost. That's why I'm here.
You're on mute, Dr. Jones.
My bad. And you think, I mean, I think I'm pretty tech savvy. I didn't pick up on that. Thank you. So again, I want to say thank you to everyone for being here, because again, you could be anywhere else, but you're here with me, and we're going to be together for the next few days. And so you'll know, the whole idea of having this 4-part series is something that I created in the midst of the pandemic as a response to how can I successfully pivot what I typically would do face-to-face and be able to still have that level of engagement, as well as how do we move from theory to practice. And so I'm not coming to you today with, you know, all these terms and theoretical frameworks. I want us to be able to have a dialogue about how we can move the needle forward in terms of accountability, building competencies, relationships, social capital, and community safety and resources. And what does that consist of? And so I just gave you one of the answers to our quiz that we're going to have at the very end. Like, what are the ABCs of restorative justice? That's accountability, building competencies, relationships, and social capital, community safety, and community resources. And so what I want to be able to do real quick before we even continue, I just placed the link for attendance. For attendance purposes, I need to make sure that as we navigate this process from beginning to end of this training, that I'm able to have notes and documentation to show that when you get your certificate of completion, which will be your digital certificate of completion, that consists of the partnership that I have with the Cook County Southland Juvenile Justice Council and the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, along with my organization, Purple Path, that you have successfully completed and actively participated and attended each session. Even if you have to leave out from time to time, as I do understand, we're in this process together. I want us to be able to, not necessarily feel, I don't want anyone to feel intimidated or antagonized. I want this to be a conversation of individuals who are seeking to learn more and implement and execute restorative justice as a way of life. And so one of the things I want to start off with is saying that I don't ever, I don't ever hear us say that restorative justice is a program. And this is the reason why. When we try to give restorative justice this frame that it's a program, what have we seen in the history of education? That when leadership change, when ideas change, when the time change, the program ends. And so when we start to implement restorative justice, successfully implement and properly execute restorative justice as a way of life to change and move the needle forward in terms of the climate and culture that you're going to be impacting, that when we see it as a way of life, then it's more sustainable. It has more opportunities to grow. It has opportunities to not just what does restorative justice look like in the schools, but what does it look like in the homes? What does it look like in the communities? What does it look like in the church? In every capacity, in every environment that you may be a part of. So again, restorative justice is not a program, it's a way of life. Make sure that at some point in time throughout this entire process that you do complete that Google form, which is for attendance purposes, so that I could keep track that you attended. Before we even continue and go on into like the nook and cranny of why we're here, I just kind of want to share a little bit of my background, because I think that's very important to understand, like, as I facilitate this process, what makes me qualified to even do it. And so I'm gonna start at the age of 15, and I'm gonna give y'all like the less than 5 minute story. I'm a preacher's kid. If you know anything about being a preacher's kid, I lived up to that. I lived up to the good of it. I lived up to the bad of it. I lived up to the not so, whatever however you want to put it, the in between. I lived up to that. And so at the age of 15, I decided to walk away from that foundation that was built for me, knowing that, I'm a virtual learner. So I had a hard time understanding the differences of when to ask a question and when not to ask a question, because I was taught that when you go to school and you are in the classroom and your teacher explains something to you that you don't understand, and I'm asking questions, what do you do when you don't understand something? You come off mute, we're just talking.
So
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand and what?
Ask the question.
Ask the question. Exactly. And so I was confused because my mom taught me that if you are in class, you be the stand-up student, you be courageous, because I'm pretty sure someone else in the class has that same question. They just didn't have the courage enough to ask it because they may be, quote unquote, called dumb or stupid or whatever the case may be. But you be that go-to student, you be that star student. Cool, I got you. But at the same time, because my mom is a minister, when I'm in church and I don't understand the scripture because it's a King James version, and then thee, thou, thou, what, I'm like, what is happening here? And I ask a question, it's seen as a form of disrespect. So now I'm confused, because you tell me if I have a question, ask the question, but it all depends on the environment. And then if the church is supposed to be my safe space, if it's supposed to be my brave space, and it's supposed to be a place of understanding and coming as you are, then I'm confused. And so at the age of 15, I was like, yeah, I'm done. Went before my congregation and told them it's been a wrap. You and your God, peace, deuces. I'll holler at y'all later. And I thought something else was out there for me, and it wasn't. But at the same time, it was like the perfect match. I met this young man, his name is Dante, and that is his real name. I met Dante. He was the drug dealer of the neighborhood. He had the gold-plated rims, the Cutlass with the sounds that shake your windows. It was just an amazing experience. And because I was so lost and I didn't know what self-love consisted of, I didn't know self-worth. I didn't even understand that I was going through what was a traumatic experience, because at the age of 15, February of 96, I fell and broke my ankle. And when I fell and went to get up, my left ankle partially detached from my leg. So I had to go through several different surgeries. To this day, I still have a metal plate, metal bolt, metal screws. The back heel of my left foot is all metal. So I'm a bionic woman. And so fast forward, not understanding that one particular situation, because most times when we think of trauma, we think about the most egregious and the most heinous situations, that it had to be something that was repetitive. No, this was one isolated incident, and that's considered acute trauma. And because of that one isolated incident, that was what triggered something in my mind that led on to years of pain and years of suffering. And as I fast forward, I get with this young man, not knowing who I was, but he gave me the attention that I was looking for. And because my mom at that particular time was like, you know, we're struggling, but we don't want anybody to know we were struggling. We don't ask for anything. We're just going to pray about it and we'll get through it. And I didn't understand it. I'm like, this how we supposed to live? Sharing a pack of noodles between the two of us? Nah, I'm not going. And so it just was convenient. It was convenient. It was accessible to get with this young man who was able to provide the basic necessities that was not being able to be provided at home. And that goes to adverse childhood experiences that we'll talk about later on. And so fast forward, get with this young man. I get pregnant at the age of 17, have my first child at 17, 6 weeks before my 18th birthday, have my second child at 19, Patricia and Patrick, my two oldest children. And then fast forward, he decided that he didn't want to be with me anymore because I had too many kids. I don't know how that sounds because they were his kids too. But anyways, so because I didn't have tangible skills, I didn't have employable skills, because I solely relied on him, I fell into a pit of depression, not knowing that I already was suffering from postpartum depression, not knowing I was already suffering from that acute trauma. And so all these things coupled together had me down a hole. And so one night I decided I didn't want to live anymore. And so when I made the decision I didn't want to live anymore, it went from suicidal ideations to the actual attempt. And so that situation is when I found out, after being hospitalized, liver collapse, kidney failure, and then going into the psychiatric ward, I was diagnosed with being bipolar. And when they explained to me what bipolar was, I was like, that's everyone in Harvey, Illinois. I'm from Harvey. I was like, you talking about too many high highs, too many low lows. That's everybody I know. So let me see what I'm doing. Right. And so with that, because we live in a Black community, we don't talk about college education in the community that I came from. We did not talk about, you know, depression. We didn't talk about mental illness. We didn't talk, it's a lot of things that we didn't talk about and didn't have a name for it. And then there was a lot of times when you don't have a name for something because it's not something that's a part of your norm and it's not part of your language, then what do you do with these bottled up emotions that no one talks about? And it becomes a sense of anger. And so because of that, as my story continued on, I found myself in many situations, many I could control and many that I couldn't. And so one night I was out and I was raped and I was sexually assaulted. And I went to school the next day because I had finals. Because in my mind, when I went to the hospital, because of the record I kind of made for myself, or the name I made for myself in the community at that time, and I didn't have a good working relationship with the police department, that when I went to get the help that I thought I needed, or that I knew I needed, and reached out to the people that I thought could help, because of the name I had made for myself, I was pretty much ostracized. And so I just made the decision like, well, maybe that's just how it's supposed to go. You know, I victimized myself. What I did was, it was the blame game. Like, well, maybe I shouldn't have been there. Maybe I knew what time of day it was. Maybe I should have known the difference between a hotel and a motel. And I could go on and on about all the things and excuses that I made to the reason why I wanted to just like put it on the back burner. Well, what we fail to realize is that when we have unresolved issues, when we have unhealed trauma, and you call yourself suppressing it by going, you're going to work it away, you're going to drink it away, you're going to sex it away, you're going to go to school the next day. And I passed my finals. I had 110% out of 100. I had the top score. I said, if I could get 110% on a test and I just was raped the night before, I'm good. But I wasn't. And so fast forward, I found myself in some crazy situations. I met a young man. He looked just like Usher. I'm pretty sure everybody know Usher, the R&B singer. He had all his teeth. You know, his nail bed looked nice. You know, you know, I mean, he was decent. So, but that goes to always understanding that it's so important to not judge a book by its cover. And so who I met was his representative. I didn't meet him until after we got married. And so we get married not knowing he was addicted to drugs and not knowing that he had a background that was somewhat little touchy. And with that being said, I'm broken and he broken, and broke plus broke Do we have any math teachers? Because I want somebody to give me the equation of broke plus broke. And I don't think you even need to be a math teacher to tell me that. Right?
Pretty sure that's brokety broke. Yes, ma'am.
Squared.
Yes, ma'am.
And because I'm a mom of 2 children and I had just had my 3rd child, it's like I'm raising children to be broken as well. And so domestic violence played its part. Fractured hip, stabbed in the stomach with a fork, fractured pinky finger. Didn't want to go to the hospital too much because I knew that if I continued to go to the hospital that my children were going to be taken away from me, because there was only so many times I could lie. And so that situation did not pan out well. When I made the decision that I wanted to leave, I found out I was pregnant with my 4th child. And so I stayed because in my mind, who's going to help me raise these kids? Because I justified his actions by saying, as long as he was whipping my behind and not whipping the children, that everybody's going to be okay. But what we fail to realize is that good, not so good, or indifferent, that any decision that you make don't just affect you, it affects the people connected to you. And just because it affects you one way, it may affect them totally different. And so we have to be very careful about how we operate, the decisions we make, and be able to show more compassion and empathy. And so as my story continues, and I'm giving you the quickest version of my story that I possibly can. When I had my 4th child, I made the decision I was going to leave, and I had left. And when I went to go retrieve my, we was renting an apartment, and I broke my lease, and I went to go retrieve my social security card and birth certificates because I was like, I could leave everything else. I was attacked. And when I was attacked and came to, realized I had been raped again. And so with that situation in itself, we fast forward and I'm pregnant again. And I'm like, the only way I could be pregnant, and my name ain't Mary, is that, and that's how we realized I was raped, because at first it was just, I thought I was attacked. We did not know that it was a situation of rape until I found out I was pregnant again with my 5th child. And so my 5th child is a result of rape. And for the longest during that pregnancy, I just couldn't see me giving birth to a child that wasn't based off love. It wasn't based off lust. It wasn't, it was just like, this is a sin and this is a crime. And so therefore it was a hard pregnancy. And even in the midst of all that, cervical cancer, different things had happened. And because of the sake of our time, I just kind of want to give you the glimpse of the reason why this work is so important for me and to me. And so I gave birth to my 5th child on my 26th birthday. I went in labor on November 19, 2006, and I didn't have her until November 22nd. I was in labor for 3 days because what had happened was the year prior to, I had 7 surgeries to remove what was cancerous and freeze what was not. So when I was pregnant with my 5th child, I was in labor, but I wouldn't dilate because of all the scar tissue from the surgeries in the year before. And so as I laid there basically dying, they called my mother, who was my emergency contact, and my mom and I are 40 years apart. So if I'm 26, she's 66. And again, the decisions I made affected her so that her health significantly declined because of things that she went through with me. And so I was in this hospital by myself giving birth to this last and final child. I named her Sanaa Grace. She's 14 now. And if y'all know somebody that want to help her, because she gets on her nerves. But
my Sanaa alone.
Oh my gosh, wait till you see. I'm gonna bring her in here at the very end. She's tall. We're the same height, and that's a problem because in her mind, now that we're the same height, we equals. I'm like, that ain't how that go. But anyway, as I laid there dying, I went from being able to crack jokes, because that's always been my coping mechanism. I don't care what I'm going through, I'm gonna crack a joke. And it went from me laughing, cracking jokes to I'm trying to form a sentence and can't talk. And I hear all these monitors going off and doctors and nurses are running around, and it went from me being able to hear and comprehend to not really understanding anything that was happening. And if you have ever been in a situation where you're panicking, there could be things verbatim. Like I know the scripture, even the devil know the scripture, but I knew the sinner's prayer, and I was so confused, y'all. I was like, to whom, where are we going? God, are you forgive something? And I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. So I was like, you know what? Forget trying to quote a prayer, because I think I'm going to hell. And I'm saying this because I grew up with the understanding that when you get ready to go home to glory, you see the light. And I didn't see any light. I saw straight darkness, and I got scared. And so if I didn't know God any other time before, I knew him that day on November 22nd, 2006. And I was like, look here, fam. I may not get it right, and I may have done some things, and there's some things that may have been done to me, but I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to just survive. I want to live, and I want to thrive. I want to raise my own children. And then I started being very specific. And even though it may have been mumbling to them, I knew what I was saying. And so they called my mother, and my mom was my emergency contact, and they said, Mrs. Anderson, it's very unfortunate we're making this phone call. And at this point in time, we really need to seek your guidance in terms of who life to save. Because at this point, we're at the crossroad where we're not understanding it, or we're not knowing if we're able to save both. So would you like for us to try to save this unborn child, or would you like for us to try to save your daughter? And she did not answer quickly. Because in my mind, I'm like, save my daughter. Like, I'm like, come on, say something. And she didn't. It took us some time. It was the longest pause that I think I ever experienced in my life. And that pause was because when you are in a situation where you love someone, but they don't love themselves, when you are in a situation where you see their potential, but they haven't reached it, when you are in a situation where I care for you, but I can't carry this burden for you, then what do you do? And so after having, you know, that pause for the longest time, she finally said, whatever you do, can you please try to save my daughter's life? And if for any reason she passes away while I'm on this phone, can at least listen to hear her take her last breath. And I'm still here. I went into emergency C-section and gave birth to my last and final child. And my mom was like, why y'all in there? Tie everything up, because we're not doing this anymore. And so I gave birth to Sanaa Grace. She was like a 9-pound baby. And Lord, I think she was overdue. She was a month and a half overdue, to be honest. And she came out grown. And she's grown now. And so she's 14. And so I'm a mother of a 14-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 20-year-old, and a 22-year-old. My children I have 4 daughters and 1 son. My son is the 20-year-old. He's away at school on a pre-med track at Xavier University in Louisiana. My oldest girl is going back to Governor State, hopefully in the fall, if not in the spring, but she also have a thriving business called Sunflower Sugar Scrubs. My 17 and my 16-year-old, Lord have mercy, both of them are working. One works at Sharks and going to school. The other one works in a shop and going to school. And then my 14-year-old has a business called Thank God for Grace Cuticle Oil. She has a cuticle oil business. And all 4 girls are published authors with books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. I'm an author of 7 books. My oldest girl is writing her 2nd book. And I'm saying all this to say that oftentimes when I share a story like the story I just shared before the glow up, society says that because of the things that I've experienced and the things my children witness and experience themselves, that the likelihood of them being able to thrive is slim. But I combat, and I've shown you, and I can tell you that that's not our case. So we're called the comeback kids. And so moving forward, I was able to remarry in 2012. I went back to school in 2010. I went to get my bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies with a minor in social work. I got a master's in criminal justice and co-created the very first restorative justice certificate program in the state of Illinois at the higher education level from Governor State University, GSU. And then I went on to get my doctorate of interdisciplinary leadership with a focus of specialization in higher education administration, and graduated 2016. And so since then, I've been able to be a college professor at Governor State, Trinity Christian College, Chicago State, Northern National Louis University, and some online situations. I'm the Restorative Justice Chairwoman for the Cook County Southland Juvenile Justice Council. Done work with the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice, the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. I work with the Cook County Sheriff's Department, and I'm currently the District Coordinator of Restorative Justice and Restorative Practices for Thornton Township High School District 205. That is my story.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
God is good. So I'm saying this to say that when I'm passionate about restorative justice, mainly because when I look at the things that I've had to go through and the things I had to overcome, it was God's grace and mercy. At the same time, the same experiences that I've gone through has helped me develop the mantra, a journey not shared is a soul not healed. And I say that in saying that what's the point of us going through anything we had to go through? We all have a story. It doesn't have to be the most heinous. It doesn't have to be the most egregious, but we've all gone through something that can help someone else. And you just never know what part of your story that you're sharing is helping someone else. And so it's so important to understand that when we're talking about restorative justice, that when you need an idea of what restorative justice look like, here I am. What does that look like as in terms of a mother? What does that look like in terms of an educator? I never knew that I would be where I am today, but I'm so glad that I am. And so my mom coins me the comeback kid. I work with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, and they've coined me the Olivia Pope of education. And I think that's pretty dope. Only thing is I don't wear a trench coat, I wear a hoodie. And so that is my story. And that is the reason why I do the work that I do. And that is the reason why I have the relationships that I have. And my team and I have a team. Majority of them are family. And then I have about 8 individuals who are part of the team who are not directly related to me, that we've done the numbers. And over the last 10 years, I've trained over 10,000 people. And I don't do, I do the work. A lot of times you do the work, I'm not a numbers person. I just want to do what I'm supposed to do. And I did not realize that it was just that significant. And I think that's something that can be commended. And so I'm just thankful to be here. And so what I want to do right now, and I know for the sake of time, it's already 6:14, but I'm truly thankful to have each one of you. We're going to do an exercise, and we're going to take about 5 minutes to do this exercise. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen. And this is going to be our icebreaker before we get off into our work. Let me, this is the exercise here. And let me move some things around. All right. So what we're going to do here, think about it like this. Oftentimes we hear the idea, what's on your plate? Like, what all you got going on? What's on your schedule? What's the priority? What's not priority? What are all the things, activities? What are all the projects you have going on? I want you to take the next 5 minutes and just jot down, if you have pen and paper, hopefully you have pen and paper with you. Jot down all the things that you have on your plate I don't want you to think too hard about it. I want you to just be as random as you possibly can be, but just start writing down all the things you have on your plate. And you have 5 minutes to complete this part of the exercise, which is our icebreaker. And it's 6:16 right now. So you have until 6:21.
So I can see that. I said, I'm gonna come in there so I can see. Let me turn this on for you.
All right, everyone. It is 6:21. I would love, if you feel compelled or open to do so, I would love to at least have one or two of you share your response to this exercise.
Yeah, hi, this is Dr. Neal,
Yes,
Gary
sir.
Neal. Yeah, so I don't have a lot of things going on, but the things that I do have going on are quite significant in my life. I have a podcast that I just started about a month ago, and what I thought was very hard wasn't that hard at all. You know, I took it before the Lord, and He just kind of opened up some doors and just showered out blessings, and things are going well. So I'm hoping that you and I can talk a little bit about that once this is over, and get together and maybe do some ventures together as well.
Yes, sir.
Still working. I am the security manager here at the University of Florida. And so again, just taking those leadership roles, but I have about 100-man staff. And so you know what that can be like in being in leadership. So although it's not difficult work, it's constant. And so it takes making good, sound, right decisions. Also family. I have 4 grandchildren that I love to spend time with. And it just seems like nobody gets all the time that they want to have with their papa. So stretching that. Also, I'm married, happily married for 34 years to my beautiful wife, Marilyn. She and I are residing down here and trying to figure out how we can get some retirement time in together. And so we're both working ministry in our church. Very committed to that as well, which consumed about 3-4 different ministries. On the praise team, I'm the assistant pastor, you name it. And as if you've been in church, you know you wear multiple hats when things need to get done. So although it's a lot of things that might be on my plate, it's nothing that I wouldn't be minding. So I'm doing what I've been called to do. I love it. Would I like to have more time? Absolutely, like anybody else, but I'll never complain about it.
I appreciate that, Dr. Neal. You sound like you got a lot on your plate, but you wear it well, or you make it sound real good and balanced.
That's right.
Anyone else? One more person would like to share? Ms. Banks, please do.
I think I told you guys earlier, I'm a discipline secretary, president of my local educators union. I am the head middle school cheerleading coach. I'm also a private caregiver, plus I do care for my parents. And I'm in the middle of planning a wedding. So I've got a lot going on.
So when it comes to this exercise, and I'm gonna come back to Dr. Neal as well, but for you, Ms. Banks, how did this exercise make you feel?
I didn't realize I had so much. As I just pray to God and just do it, because I know it has to be done, but I didn't realize I had so much till we actually had to sit down and think about it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your response. How about you, Dr. Neal?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
When it comes to this exercise, how did it make you feel?
Just accountable. You know, it's always nice to take a glimpse. Sometimes you're moving so fast, you don't realize that, you know, you're doing some significant things in the lives of other people. But I think because it's been God, you know, God has given you the gift to do it, you don't really recognize your gift like other people's do. So I don't believe your gift is actually for you. It's for the people to be blessed by you. So yeah, so I just I accept it. Like you said before, I just try to wear it well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Thank you. And to be honest, the whole purpose of this exercise was to just tap into the power of reflection. Oftentimes we are goers, we are doers, we do the work without second thought. And when we have to really just sit down and think about all the different things we have going on, it can become overwhelming at times. And then other times it's like you're really proud of yourself. I did not know. And so I want us to just be able to give ourselves the appreciation that if we don't get it from anyone else, be able to appreciate ourselves and acknowledge the work that you're doing and that you are wearing it well. And then if you're not, being able to take a step back to look at what all you have on your plate and what can you delegate? What can, you know, what is the what is priority, and be able to compartmentalize those different projects that you may be working on. So I truly just want to say thank you for taking the time to complete that exercise. And I see your response, Ms. Jordan, no problem whatsoever. And so let's get into the nook and cranny of the work. So my whole goal is to make sure that I have about 40 slides. We'll cover about 10 slides per session. And that's the reason why I was very strategic in the way of doing this. And so we pretty much captured the idea of, being able to welcome you to Restorative Justice 101, having the icebreaker, doing the introduction. So we kind of got through a majority of that. And then at your own leisure, what'll happen is at the end of our session today, and that's why it's so important for you to complete the attendance log, is that when you complete the attendance, I'm just taking those email addresses, and hopefully you're using the same email address that you registered to take this course, so that at the end of our session today, I'll send you the recap via email each day so that you'll have the information that's tangible to you right then and there. And then at the very end, I'll give you everything all at once. But for the most part, it's very important to understand the reason, again, why I do the work that I do, why am I qualified to do the work that I do. And then at your own leisure, you can have opportunity to watch my video on my YouTube channel. And so I want to just be able to give you like the whole idea of the course description. And because of being a college professor and having to create a syllabus and going through these different processes to get the syllabus approved, I kind of just mimicked the things that I've learned. And I think that's so important, that everything that you've gone through, even if you don't understand it at that particular time, is for a reason. I never knew that the skills, the things that I didn't like to do, or the work that I had to put in and didn't understand the reason why I had to put that type of work in, it all came, full circle for me in the last 2 years, because those things that I was very uncomfortable about doing, or those things that had me in the ideal or the frame of mind that I had to think outside the box. And I want to also say, before we even move forward, that I'm totally against about saying think outside the box, because what happens is you may think outside the box, but the moment that you get too uncomfortable or start to navigate something that's something you've never been exposed to, or something that makes you uncomfortable, you go back to the box, you revert back to old ways, or you revert back to hiding, or you revert back to like, hey, I'm gonna take my hands off of it. So my whole thing is throw the box away, because if you throw the box away, opposed to just thinking outside the box and reverting back to that box when you get uncomfortable, is that when you throw the box away, you don't have no choice but to grow. You cannot be stagnant. And so the whole idea of this course is being able to understand that I want you to understand the difference between restorative justice, restorative practices. I want you to know how you can best implement and properly execute restorative justice and restorative practices in your home, in your community, education, justice systems, and beyond. But most importantly, understanding too, a lot of times people may have a sense of what restorative justice is, but I've heard it too many times where they use restorative justice and restorative practices as two terms used interchangeably, when in essence, restorative justice is always reactive. It's as simple as it says, restoring justice. There's been a problem, there's a harm, someone's offended. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical, it could be verbal, but in any form of fashion where someone was made uncomfortable and have been harmed or offended, even if it's by our words, because words do hurt, that we have to be able to bring those people who were impacted by that particular situation. And also keep in mind that it may be time consuming, because say for instance, if Dr. Tasha and I are having this issue between us, even if we're online, in this virtual world, but you all witnessed it, it's not just a matter of what's going on between Dr. Tasha and me, it's a matter of what's happening between all of us. And so how can we bring shareholders together to understand that there was a harm and be able to speak and give voice to what that harm may consist of, and how everyone was individually and collectively impacted by that harm, and then come up with tangible and sustainable ways as to the way we're going to move forward, so that in the situation, something egregious, something heinous, or something, it could be real simple, but if there's a disagreement, how can we use the skills and the tools and the resources that are given to us in this restorative process, so that if this situation happens again, we have a better understanding of how we can handle it, so that we can be more effective, so that we can be more community oriented, so that we can get back to our way of norm, or whatever norm may consist of. And so the rationale of this course is being able to understand that RJ, which is restorative justice, is a collaborative decision-making process. And not only is it a collaborative decision-making process, we have to understand too, then in our typical zero tolerance policy, or in our criminal justice system, most times the person who is deemed the offender, which is language I typically do not use when we're talking about restorative justice, because when we're talking about RJ, I want us to be very deliberate in our in the way that we speak And even in the sense that I'm still learning, right? And so learning never ends, but at the same time, if we're going to continue to use the traditional judicial processing and systems and language, then how is it restorative? And so you'll find out in situations that it's easy for us to say this person is the victim or this person is offender. And then when you get in a situation where you have to sit with those individuals, you may realize that what you come into a situation making the assumption, then how are we getting to the root cause if we already had our mind made up? And it kind of remind me of this book that I read called Untethered Soul. And in this book, the author discusses how what happens most times is that when we're in a situation where there's a conflict between individuals, one or two individuals or more, that you have already conjured up in your mind how, how this whole situation is going to pan out when you have to confront that person. And I'm pretty sure out of all of us that are here today together, we can think of times, whether it's with your spouse, a sister, a brother, a family member, whoever, a friend, and you have a disagreement, and then you're coming to the idea like, I need to confront the situation head on. And when you come up with the idea in your mind, like, okay, I'm gonna say this, and I bet you this is what they're gonna respond with. And then and when she say that, then I'm gonna say this. And now you've already placed this assumption that continues to harm that relationship, because you're not coming in open-minded. You come in with the idea of what's already going to happen, and then you're shocked, and then you don't know how to respond when that response that you thought was not happening. So now what are you going to do? And so we got to be very conscientious of being open-minded and how we transition from that poverty mindset to one that's more restorative and of wealth mindset. And so then we'll also be talking about the historical concepts of what restorative justice is all about, right? And so when we think about restorative justice from a historical context, before we had law enforcement, before we had a judicial system, before we had school resource officers, and anybody that we may deem decision makers in terms of being authoritative figures when it comes to crime and punishment and any other type of punitive measures, that before we had all those things in place, we had community. Community took care of community. Community came together and said, when there's a harm, we don't need an outsider coming in to help us figure out what the consequence need to be. We're going to have someone that knows this individual, know the backstory, know the why. And even think about when I was growing up, we had a village. If I had did something, my neighbors were going to be, in the mix, my family, extended family members, as well as my neutral core family. And so we have to understand now we have an opportunity, especially in the midst of this pandemic, to really redefine the village and reimagine education in its totality. And so my question to you before we even continue on, and I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment because I can go on and on, but again, I want this to be more of a conversation. How can we create positive, sustainable change in our various capacities? And so I know initially when we did our icebreaker exercise, I heard from Dr. Neal and I heard from Ms. Banks. I would love to hear from two other individuals in terms of what, give me some ideas, or let's have a conversation about what this look like. What does it look like to create positive, sustainable change? And I'm very deliberate in saying positive, sustainable change, because a lot of times I'm like, people say like, hey, I want to be a change agent. Well, I want you to be specific, because you could be a change agent, but are you changing them to do something positive, or are you changing them to do something negative? Because I could think about gang leaders. They have, well, we live in a day and age now, we have more factions than we do gangs, official gangs, where now, if you live on the east side of the block and he live on the west side of the block, now it's the east side boys against the west side boys. Like, where did this come from? I could go on and on, especially as an educator, how many different before we even answer this question, I had one young man, I love him to this day. And I knew he joined this gang out of fear. Because he lives in this neighborhood, he sees these people on a daily basis. So he felt like the only option he had was to join these individuals. And so it was called the Mike gang. So I asked him one day, I said, well, who's Mike? Because I want to meet him. And he was like, I don't know, Dr. Jones. I don't even think Mike is real. And I said, how that make you feel? And how can I support you? And how can I bring your family in this, equation? Do your mom know that you in this Mike gang? Do Do Mike know you? Mike gang, you know, we have to be very deliberate in the conversations that we're having with our youth. But all those type of conversations I have with youth is because of relationship. And that's one of the hugest components when it comes to restorative justice. If you don't have a relationship, you just can't come asking me just anything. You might have created more harm and have offended me now. So your intentions or your whatever it may be may have been well, but if you don't know who I am, you can't just come to me asking me anything, especially when it comes to sensitive situations such as gang affiliations or anything of that nature. And so my question, how can we create positive, sustainable change?
Well, I'll start by saying, let me make sure I get this right. I'll start by saying you have to build some type of trust in the relationship. Working with a lot of young men over the years, that was the first step, is to try to consistently develop that trust. What I found also is that they have so many people that have started off in that trust aspect and then let them down. So the buy-in is pretty hard. Consistency is another key. Once you get to that, then you can start working on some of the issues and challenges that they have.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
One more person.
I would like to chime in if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Positive, sustainable change. I think that you have to be surrounded with a group of like-minded people that also want and buy into the change that you are trying to create. I think that you have to have clear steps on who the shareholders are and could help you have this change within whatever community you're trying to make it in. And then clear steps, actionable steps on what this change is going to look like and how you guys are going to do it. And I think without some of those components, it tends to fall apart.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Ms. Andrews. So this leads me to our next exercise. I'm pretty sure you're like, hey, Dr. Jones, all these exercises, right? But it's important and it's part of the work. So I'm going to give you like 2 scenarios. And what I want you to be able to do is just randomly write down whatever your response is to each scenario. And then we're going to have a discussion about it. And then it's going to lead to this next part before we even move on to the next part after that. So I want you to think about in the work that you do, whether it's your full-time work, whether it's your retired, whether it's your ministry, whatever, just focus on one position and think about the best day you had in that position. What was happening that day? How was it the best day? Describe that best day.
Do you want us to answer right now or?
Write it down if you can.
Okay.
The best day. I'll give you about another minute or so. If you need a little longer, please feel free to do so.
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
No problem. Your best day. I want you to be able to describe your best day at work. What was happening that day that made it your best day? All right. Do we need more time or we're good to move on? Okay, look like we're good. All right. So now that you've thought of your best day, I want you to look in a separate column or on a separate list or a different sheet of paper, describe the worst day. I see some are still writing, so I'm gonna give it about another minute or so. All right. So now that you have your best day and your worst day, are there any commonalities? Like how do, you know, what I want to say is when you look at your best day and your worst day, it shows you in the essence when it comes to your values. I want you to think about your best day and your worst day and look at those two different lists and think about that experience, how it made you feel, how it made you feel to the point where this was my best day, how it made you feel to the point where this is your worst day. It helps you start to think about some of the common themes between that best day and that worst day, which should be total opposites, but at the same time, you might see some like, this is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to be acknowledged. This is how I want to be seen. This is how I want to be a part. And so when you think about the best day, I'm pretty sure when you look at your best day, I want someone to tell me just randomly, you don't, anyone, just tell me like some of the things when it comes to your best day, what did that look like? I see Tiffany, I see your face.
I just jotted down some things. I just said the air felt light, positive energy. It was like clear, something I did, but acknowledging others is, you know, no pressure. You know,
I know it's
that day, and it seems simple, but that's, you know, I've had a couple of those days, but that was one of my best days.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Someone else, share your best day. What did that best day look like or feel like?
I'll share. I felt like I was heard and respected, and I felt like I brought value to the company.
Okay. So when it comes to your worst day, what did that worst day consist of?
I felt stripped of any authority that I had worked so hard for. And I was told that I needed to lower my standards, and I felt misunderstood.
Tabitha, I appreciate that. Anyone else? Worst day. Tell me about the worst day. Ms. Banks.
I would say from
Ms. Banks.
Okay, I would say the best day has been whenever there was a buy-in for the team and you saw them being cohesive and working together for the greater good. I think the worst day for me, being an older worker, is for somebody to say to me, learn the culture of the agency and respect the youth that are here. And I think I was the older staff and I was offended by that. And for me, during that time, I saw a lot of division in the team. You know, so.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jordan. Ms. Banks?
Best day for me was all staff were at work. We didn't have to get any subs, no discipline issues, and able to take a breath. So that was for a good day, but for a bad day, 10 teachers out, didn't have enough subs. I had to end up subbing in the class. We had to send 10 teachers home for COVID related issues, and then 3 students home for COVID related issues. And then basically just trying to cover for other secretaries in the building so they could have lunches and breaks. So I felt frustrated, defeated, very tired.
So let's think about that, because here we are, we're all adults, and we're able to navigate what our best day look like and what our worst day feel like based off feelings and just off the conversations we've had. For those who are able to share, that best day was you being able to be seen, you being able to be heard, There was a sense of community. You all were speaking the same language. You was on the same page. There was cohesiveness. Like I'm using the words that you are using, right? But on that worst day, it was like, it's unknown. I have no idea what's happening. This is very random. There's no structure. I feel defeated. I feel, I don't feel validated, even though I do feel like validation is for parking only. But at the same time, there's a sense of you that's just like, I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. It's too much confusion. We're not speaking the same language. We're not on the same page. We can't do the work that need to be done because we're not being the leaders that we're supposed to be, whether that's individually or collectively. So think about that in the work that you do when it comes to your values. I want us to take the time now that we see where our best day and our worst day is in our capacities and our work. Now you should be able to frame an idea of what your values look like. And your values of who you like, my values have changed over the years, especially in the midst of this pandemic. Things have changed drastically for all of us. We're all learning how to, and I know where some of us are overusing the term pivot, but that's the best way I could put it. We're all learning how to pivot and do things that we've never done before. At the same time, it has helped me develop that when I look at my best day and when I look at my worst day and I look at the differences between the two, it helps me to understand how I consider my top values. And so what I'll do with you real quick, just so you know, the things that I tell you to do, I do myself. I'm gonna share my screen with you so you can see what I'm speaking of. So for me, I turn mine into a spreadsheet. I'm big on, like, I have to see things. So I give you like my best day at work and then how did I feel? And I think, oh, Dr. Davis, you would see when I said serving someone else. So I added a third category for myself, but for the most part, because of Dr. Davis, I was able to give out food baskets for Juneteenth last year in the midst of a pandemic, and people were still showing up and showing out. But when I think about my best day at work being described and my worst day, my best day was me feeling welcomed. It was very welcoming. It was full of laughter. There was a positive check-in. We had goal setting for the day, not for the week. We take it day by day because each day bring on something different, especially when you're in the field of education and you coming with all different walks of life. You don't know what happened the night before. So something may have happened overnight that you may have had a plan. You may have had a schedule. Even when it comes to teachers, we have lesson plans. We have different things that we have to be able to check off our list day to day. But how can you do that and still humanize the experiences of those that you serve? And so being able to brainstorm ideas for discipline processes, training and facilitating, and just being solution oriented. Now, on my worst day, I felt stressed due to lack of structure because, again, I think this was with Ms. Banks. People were calling off, trying to sub, and moving around in ways I hadn't had to move around before. I felt overwhelmed due to lack of staff. Parents and guardians were irate and had been verbally abusive, and that's a trigger because when you've gone through certain things in your life, I don't care how much you heal and how much you share your story, you're a human being. So somebody could say something, you really have to check in with yourself before you check out. And so, and then there was multiple student fights and infractions. And so that was my worst day compared to my best day. And when I looked at those 2 days and looked at the differences between those 2 days and how I described them, it helped me better understand my values. And so what I want you to be able to do right now is think about the best day and the worst day, and then start writing down your values. But not only write those values down, I want you to be able to define those values, because that's very important. Because I might say, I'm saying integrity is the ability to stand my ground even when it make me uncomfortable and not compromising my beliefs. But you may say integrity means something else. But in order for us to even start beginning to understand each other's language, we have to speak truth to who we are in terms of our values, our morals, and beliefs. And so what I want you to do right now for the next 5 minutes is just jot down your top. I mean, it don't have to be a long list of values. For me, I had like 8. But for you, whatever that may be, not only do I want you to write your values down based off the best and worst day just being described, I want you to be able to define those values. And I'll give us till 6:55. All right. Welcome back. If you still need more time, please do what you need to do. But I would love, again, like, let's have a conversation about this particular exercise. And then I'm also going to be able to share why this part of the work is so important as it relates to the work we're speaking of in terms of restorative justice. Where I just need one brave soul.
You just want us to chime in?
Yes, about your values based off the exercise of best day, worst day.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't get a chance to talk about that. I was kind of wanting to listen to what others were saying, but you know,
it's no problem. It's all good.
being honest. No, but you know, I with work, you know, as I alluded before, you know, I started a podcast, and the podcast actually challenged me to really delve into me in a very, very different ways that I've been wanting to explore. And that was one of my best days. I mean, I've been in the law enforcement career for 30 years. I can speak volumes with that, but I wanted to give something that's fresh and new to me to be able to share with you. And so it helped me understand just how people say I'm humble, but I had to realize just how humble I was, and being able to know that, you know, instead of following what everyone else did, I was trailblazing in my life, and I'm starting to open opportunities for myself, and not this time focusing on me. You know, and so I think with that, as you came about a lot of values that I could think about, that I wanted to be honest with myself about, that I am truly, that I can say that I am, because I didn't have anybody to have to verify it or for me. I mean, it was, I can feel it and see for myself that that is who I am, you know? And so I think on my worst day was probably terminating someone from work, and realizing the gentleness, and then had to go into that and the compassion that you have for that, because I don't know if anybody's ever done that. I've been in my first position where I had the power to fire and hire, and firing is not a good feeling.
No,
it really isn't. And so, but I had to learn something about myself then, that things do have to be done, as you said before, even in the realm of, you know, negative instead of positive. What one sees as a negative for the organization, is a positive, because the person was pretty detrimental to the success of the organization, and what was going on not allowed to last too long. So I didn't mean to go too long into that one, but yeah, as I explored it, you know, there were pretty much numerous values that I could speak on, but the ones that stand out for me in regards to my best day was humility and reliability and joy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that. Would anybody else care to share?
Yeah, I'll share.
Yes, sir.
All right, I want to talk about the best day values connected with that was, as a rare occasion, every now and then you saw somebody that was pretty much written off as a loss by so many different systems coming into the juvenile facility, and actually watching that change over time, and then that glorious day come, whether it's 6 months. But my best day was a young man that was locked up for over 4.5 years, and I watched him grow up from a little kid into a young man. And the day that this had to be tough, young former gangbanger ran up to me and jumped in my arms like one of my own kids, and held me and hugged me like a father. I had to actually try to keep my tough shield in place, because I wasn't in a position to show that inside the jail. And it really affected me and gave me something that I needed, knowing that now I realize that the work has more value than what I thought. You know, you can go into a job like that every day and follow the numbers and go by the rules and use your techniques, but you don't often get to see the actual change and the outcome in a lot of people. And that was probably one of the best days of my career, where it kind of gave me just enough to keep on and finish it up. The values that I had related to that was the consistency, even on some of those days where that young man and others might cuss you out as many times as they need to in a day, knowing that it's not always about me. And most times it wasn't. It's the situation and the frustration, but coming in there every single day, no matter what, and treating every day as a new day, and showing that same, how you doing? Good morning, sir. Hey, today's a new day. and having that actually get through that wall between us. So that was probably my best day. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, and you know, if you remember, as I was telling my story, that my go-to has always been humor. That's one of my values. Like we gotta find something to laugh about, not because something is going wrong, but I'm huge on the energy. Like I need the energy to be right. If we're gonna work together, we're gonna be a team. I need to know how you flow. I need to know how I flow, what you find funny, what you don't find funny, because it might be hilarious to me and you be sitting there looking like, right? And so I'm big on integrity, you know, and being able to define those things. And the reason why this exercise is so important, whether you may have had to navigate to a previous job or a previous assignment or your current assignment, whether you consider work to be school or school to be work or a home, whatever that case may be, whatever environment that was that you describe in terms of worst and best day, that it helps you define where you see your strengths. It helps you define what you value in terms of relationships and how you operate. What are you seeking? What, you know, how do you want to be seen? How do you want to be heard? And what does that look like? And how do you navigate that process? And the reason why this is so important in the work of restorative justice is because I'll give you a perfect example. Values always are connected to climate and culture. And the reason I say this is because when you think about your value system, the values that you have are based off experiences. Your experiences are the only responses that you can give. If I ask you a question, you're going to answer based off an experience. It could be an experience from childhood. It could be an experience because you learned it in the classroom. It could be an experience because you witnessed it. But every response you ever give in this life is based off of, every answer you give is based off an experience in some form or fashion. And no one can take away your experience. There's a lot of things people can take away, but they can't take away your experience. And so when you're responding to different things, how are you responding? How are you showing up as your best self? How are you showing up as your worst self? And what are the things that are triggering you? Because when you're doing the work in restorative justice, how can we show compassion and empathy to others if we don't show compassion and empathy for ourselves? Or how can we think about a time where, like, I could have went like this? I had a mom, and the reason why my 7th book called Pineapple Orange Juice came about is because I had a mom call me everything but a child of God. Everything. And in this particular school, we were told as administrators, you do not hang up first. The parent has to hang up. So you mean to tell me I got to take this kind of verbal abuse? I mean, I'm literally like, I don't care how far I move the phone away from my ear, the world heard what she was saying. And when I said, like, she was getting nitty gritty, and there's always another side of a person. Like, as educated as I am, and most people see Dr. Shaniqua Jones, there's a qua in me. That's the hood chick. That's the Harvey world girl. Like, you run up, you're gonna get done up. But when you walk away from them old ways, because them old ways are not going to get me to the next level, I have too much to lose. But we also have to think about the people who don't have anything to lose. And that's the reason why they don't care about going off, because they haven't been given an opportunity. They haven't been exposed to things outside of their norm, and their norm has been dysfunctional. And so when you talk about different experiences and when you talk about values, you have to talk about climate and culture. And so when you talk about climate and culture, most times when you're going into a public square of education or a public square of any environment outside of your home, you have to understand that people are coming from different walks of life. And so what may be valuable to me, or what I may consider value, you may not. And so how do you start to form the trust that Mr. Williams was talking about? How do you form the relationships that I believe another individual mentioned earlier? How do you form the relationships if you're not going to be willing to even start the conversation to say hello? And then think about it like this. How many times have we been in an environment where I say, hey, Miss Jamise, hey girl, how you doing? And by the time you get ready to respond, I done walked off and went on about my business, because we have gotten to a point where we have dehumanized people, even when we're not, that's not our intention and we're not being deliberate, but that is the way our life has shifted, in a way that we seek instant gratification to the point where we don't want to be restorative, because being restorative takes too much time. Being restorative means, like, I got to find out your ins, your outs, your owns, your offs, your values, what you do value, what you don't value, where you come from, your backstory, the reason why you may respond to certain things the way you do because of an experience that you had directly or indirectly. That's a lot. And the easy thing in terms of instant gratification is to what? Write you off. You do something I don't like, move around. You offend, you say something, I'm finna knock your head off, and that's just be the end of that. Now I'm in jail and you in the hospital. Like, what do we solve? Or in the grave, right? And so when we're talking about being restorative, it does take time, but it's so valuable because it's sustainable. Like I could say right now, Dr. Tasha Davis, we met at Governor State University in a doctoral program, but when I say that's my sister, we don't have to talk every day. But the love is real because we had a background that was different from other people that was in a doctoral program. And we connected. Have you been in a place where you're in this public square, whether it's education or in the workforce, or whatever the situation may be, and you feel like you are the only person that's like you, not just based off race and ethnicity, but just off experience, off of culture, off of climate, the way you dress, the way you talk, whatever the case may be, you may feel isolated. And then you make connection. Like, have you ever had that nod? Like, I know the nod. Like many of us have a nod, like, what's up? Because it's something, that vibe, that energy. And so you become connected to someone based off like, it feel like it's right. And then that's how you're able to foster relationships because of the climate, because of the culture. And that's the reason why it's so important to understand your values. Because when you look at your values, it helps you best determine your fit in terms of where you are and where you want to go. And I did a podcast interview with attorney Savanya DeBarros a couple of weeks ago. And God just dropped it in my spirit and was like, in my life. And mind you, I prepare for my, interviews. But when I say this was the most randomest thing in my life, she asked me a question. It was just like that. And I said, you know what? God has told me in this moment that I'll be 3 people in this life. Right. And I'm talking about like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. No, that's not what I'm saying. I have been the person I was, the young girl I was that was lost and broken. I am the person I am today. And then I'm also going to be the person I'm going to become. And when you look at those 3 individuals, they should never be the same. And when you look at those 3 individuals and understand they should never be the same, when you find yourself in a place where you knew where you were, you know where you are, and you got an idea where you want to go, when you start to look at where you were and you start to see some of them same behaviors, then you need to be able to check yourself quickly. But see, that goes back to understanding your values. Once you look at your values and see those different experiences that you've had, best day, worst day, and those values, when you're talking about doing the work, that restorative work starts within. It don't start outward in, it starts inward out. And so when you understand your values, when you look at how do you feel your best? How do you feel your worst? How do you stay close to being at your best possible? From the best way possible in terms of environment. So that means we have to be solution oriented. Because when we're talking about being restorative, it's easy to talk about zero tolerance and say, hey, this is the infraction, this is the amount of days you're going to be suspended. This is the infraction, this is the amount of days you're going to be suspended from work, or whatever the case may be. It's easy to navigate what punitive measures look like, but what does that look like to start digging into the competencies to understand the why? See, when you think about punitive ways, it's not about the why, it's about the who. We don't care about you were broken. We don't care about your trauma. We don't care about, you didn't get any sleep. We don't care about you didn't get the basic necessities. But because this is what you did, this is the amount of time you're going to have to sit out. But when you take a restorative approach, the restorative question, the very first thing we're asking is the why. Like, why did this even come about? Tell me your side of the story. Mm-hmm. And that's so important to understand the language. And so when you understand your values, think about the people you serve. This is not, the exercises that we are doing are not just exercises for us in training. These are tangible exercises that you could do in whatever capacity you may serve. Whether it's with a team of individuals because you are a leader in your capacity, whether it's as a teacher, educator, whatever the case may be, it's always good to understand the values. It's always, because the value is going to help you understand the backstory. And the backstory is going to help you understand the experiences. And the experience is going to help you understand the reason why they respond to things a certain way. And that helps you understand them and humanize them and not dehumanize them. You're seeing them for where they are in order to get them to where they need to be, not the other way around. And so that's why it's so important to understand that this work, when I tell you, I could go on and on all day. Like, I'm even to the point like, hey, if anybody want to stick around after 7:30, we can definitely do that. But what I want to do right now, we're going to go back to the to our presentation, and I'm gonna start sharing my screen again in a moment. Let me make sure. Let me come back to you guys and share screen. And we're just going to pick up where we left off at. We only have a few more slides and we're going to have a conversation. And so I gave you the rationale in terms of what this course is all about. Not only am I giving you the rationale, I'm giving you the expected outcomes. Like, I don't want to just take this course for the sake of taking the course or taking time out of your busy schedule. Because again, you could be anywhere else, but you're here with me, right? I don't think I'm gonna keep going back to that, as corny as it may sound. But we always want to make sure that we are going to be strategic in the way we navigate these next few days together. We want to make sure that we have these outcomes. Now, I know that we have people in other states, but as it relates to like the state of Illinois, and then we're also seeing too, now that the state of Illinois has implemented Senate Bill 100, which is now Public Act 99-0456, that says that all schools, even charter schools, even private schools, have to move away from all punitive measures. We have to have alternative and equitable measures in place to make sure that every student can thrive, because Illinois was one of the top states back in 2015 with the highest numbers of suspensions and expulsions. And you had the Transforming School Discipline Collaborative, which I'm also a part of. You had different senators and other political hats go to Springfield and say, hey, like, we got to nip this in the bud because Illinois look really bad right now, and zero tolerance is not working. It has not worked. It is shown to not have worked over the years, over the decades, even the centuries. And so therefore, what can we do? And so they came up with Senate Bill 100. And so that's one of the outcomes. I want us to be very aware about the legalities behind the reason why restorative justice is so important, because most times you have different initiatives that come and go. You have PBIS, you have social emotional learning, you have all these different initiatives that's in education, higher ed, I mean, from K through 20. You have all these different measures that has been put in place in terms of discipline and what punitive measures look like. But when you start to understand that there's a legal backing that says that you have to move in terms of a mandate, a part of me is iffy, because restorative justice, anybody that goes through a restorative process, it should never be mandated, because when it's mandated, you're not coming authentically as yourself, right? So I'll give you an example. If I have two students who just had a fight and I say, hey, you can choose to get suspended or you can take this restorative route. And then I'm like, but hey, you know, you got to take this restorative route. You really don't have no other option. Then now I'm forcing you to go into a situation that you may not be prepared for, especially if you don't know the language, especially if you don't understand what the process look like, knowing that most schools have always navigated towards punitive measures. So what does this restorative process look like if I got in trouble and now you're still telling me I have opportunity to be in school? How does that look? And so most times when we talk about restorative justice, especially at an academic level, you have administrators who really don't buy into that, because they feel like it's a slap on the wrist or it's a slap to the face of the teacher, or it doesn't solve anything because you basically get away with murder. And that's not the case. That's because you have to really understand the competencies that are behind each infraction. You have to have a relationship. And again, in order to have a relationship, you have to be able to humanize the person in front of you by starting off by saying hello. And so I want you to understand that there's 5 outcomes. Not only is it about Senate Bill 100, but I want you to be able to understand the differences between restorative justice and restorative practices. I want you to understand the traditional philosophies in terms of historical context. And more importantly, what are some other ways that we could implement, not just implement, but successfully implement and properly execute restorative justice in your capacity. So even when this training is over with, I'm always huge on follow-up, like, okay, it's been a week. What is, how can we come together? And then I also provide virtual healing spaces and safe and brave spaces for those who participate in the restorative justice training, so that we can have consistent follow-up. And then we also have a private Facebook group. So this is not a one and done, and it's totally optional. But I also believe in making sure that people have the continued support, because if I'm going to talk about being restorative, and I have to talk about the sustainable efforts, and I have to make sure that I do the things that I talk about. And so how many of us ever been to the emergency room before and seen that pain chart? Now, of course, we live in a day and age of emojis. So now if you go to the emergency room, not only do you see the numerical context of, no pain to worst pain possible, but you also see the emojis to go along with it, because they learn too that as a person like me, you could give me numbers, but I'm a visual person. So not only I'm not big on the numbers, but show me some type of visualization that I can relate to. And I'm like, oh, yeah, today I'm red, I'm worst pain possible, or today I'm green. And the reason why I think something like this is so important in terms of being creative and check-in, it's not just about what you do as an educator with your students, it's about being able to understand that restorative justice is being seen as a way of life and not just something you implement and pick up and put down when you get ready, is that I do check-ins here at home. Like, hey, okay, what's going on? Scale of 1 to 10, real quick, tell me what's going on. Like, you a 0, you a 10, you a 1, what's up? And then being able to have a conversation from there, because I want my children to be able to tap into their critical thinking skills to not just say I'm a 4, but give me some context as to the reason why you a 4. Why was, why today is a 4 and yesterday was a 6? What was the difference between yesterday and today? Which goes back to what? Values. Because now you're telling me about your best day and your worst day. And you're going to continue to see the connections between not just the icebreakers. We're not just doing icebreakers and exercises for the sake of doing them for the sake of time, but it's so important to understand how the exercises that you create on your own, or that I have created and that you can utilize and whenever you get ready, that is all purposeful. So it's good to always have a check-in. You can't just go into a lesson like, hey, okay, everybody open your books. And I understand, like, as a college professor, I've done that before because the climate and culture is different in higher ed than it is in K through 12, right? But at the same time, if I'm going to continue to do the work that I do, I have to be able to check myself and say, just because they're adults or older individuals that are not in K through 12, they're still human beings and they still deserve a check-in as well. You can't get off into meeting the matters of the mind if you can't meet the matters of the heart. And that's why the check-in is so important. And then, just for the sake of, like, I've had social workers and psychologists and those who are in the support field in education, it's always, you have to understand, community and confidentiality. And so as you are in the capacity that you serve and you begin to understand restorative justice as a way of life, you may have people who, yes, you do learn a lot from those check-ins. You may have, there may be times where as you are being seen as that go-to person, there may be some things that are outside of your realm, and you have to understand the resources that you have in place, that this is not a burden for you to carry. This is more of an opportunity for you to be the person that introduce them and welcome them, and then also being able to take them to get the assistance that they need, if that is something that arises in terms of something that's a little bit more confidential and outside of your realm. And so, we talked about the course overview, we've done the introduction. And then what you'll receive at the end of the day today via email is the discussion we're going to have when we talk about, when we come together tomorrow to talk about, what does parenting look like and what does balance look like in the midst of this pandemic. So you had an author who wrote an article back in March of last year about, what does this look like in the home now that you have an opportunity to see what teachers are experiencing in the school with your child, that when you were getting these phone calls, you didn't understand it, but now you're starting to understand. And now you're starting to be able to show more compassion and empathy. And that's how we're able to break those barriers between that parents and educators may have had prior to the pandemic, because there is a silver lining in it all. And so I try to focus on the great things that are happening. And so here we are. What I want you to be able to understand when it comes to Senate Bill 100 to Public Act, there's 3 facts that you will understand that in the state of Illinois, Senate Bill became effective as a public act in September of 2016. Now, keep in mind, if you know anything about the legal system, if you know anything about putting anything into law, it's not something like, hey, let's put Senate Bill 100 in today and then tomorrow, become effective. No, it took almost, let me see, it was January 2015 when it first was introduced to Springfield, and it didn't become effective until September of 2016. So you're talking about almost 18 months later. Fact number 2, this public act applies to all public K through 12 schools, including charter schools. If you know anything about public acts, most times they have the opportunity to pick and choose when it is applicable and when it's not. But when it comes to Senate Bill 100, because we saw how intense and how high the numbers was in terms of suspensions and expulsions, you didn't have a choice. This wasn't a matter of like, hey, it's just for public schools, but charter schools and private schools can do something different. No, this is every educational institution, K through 12 in the state of Illinois. You have to abide by the rules. Fact number 3 is that school districts must create policies to help re-engage students. So keep in mind, I need people to understand that even if you live in a state like Illinois that says that we have to move away from suspension and expulsions and punitive measures of discipline, It does not mean that students don't get suspended or expelled. It's saying that you have to make sure that you have as many alternative opportunities in place. So, and it has to be documented. You know, I know like we use Power School, and then there's other school, you know, other systems that are being utilized to, you know, for log entries to keep, you know, abreast of what's happening with each student, and almost like case management to a certain extent. You have to make sure that you have every alternative and equitable opportunity in place before you even move to the idea of suspension and expulsion. And then today, this is going to be our last slide, and then we have about a good 8 to 10 minutes for discussion. I really want us to really hone in on this idea. Most people call it the social discipline window. If you've seen it before, other people may refer to it as the social capital window. But for the sake and the context of our conversation as it relates to restorative justice, we're going to go with social discipline window. And when you think about the social discipline window, I want you to understand that there's 4 quadrants. And in these 4 quadrants, you're going to see that there's, you have high control and high support, as well as low control and low support. We want to stay in the high control and high support. And so we want to learn how to do things with everyone, any person we encounter, even when it comes to ourselves. We have to learn how to internalize, like, how do we best see ourselves? How do we best support ourselves, as well as how do we best support others? And the only way you can do that is learn how to do things with one another. That's how we are restorative. That's how we're collaborative, cooperative, responsible, and accountable. So we want to always stay in that top right-hand quadrant. We don't want to do things to people as an authoritative, punitive, you know, type of control, to the point where you create this barrier of being antagonized and intimidating just off of title alone because of your authoritative figure. You're not humanizing people when you're doing things to them. And then when you do nothing, again, you're not humanizing them, because it's like you're not even there. You don't even matter. We neglect you. You don't matter. And so then the other quadrant is doing things for them, which is the bottom right. When you do things for them, you have become the enabler. So therefore, how is that sustainable? Because keep in mind, when you're talking about being restorative, when you're talking about restorative justice, when you're talking about restorative practices, we want to have sustainable opportunities for everyone, not just something that comes and goes. This is not a program, it's a way of life. But when you're doing things for them and you're enabling them, then therefore, when you're not around, they act as if they can't exist. Things don't function when you're not around, because you have become the enabler. So we don't want to do any of those 3 things. We want to learn how to do things with them, not to enable, but to empower. And so that is what I have in terms of the presentation for today. But what I want to do is take these last few minutes, and I just want us to be able to have a discussion, reflection, any questions, any concerns, so we can just do what needs to be done. I know some people have to chime out, and that's perfectly fine. But for those who are still here, like, how are you feeling? Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. And then just being able to just have, you know, a conversation for the next 7 minutes about what we discussed today.
I'll jump in.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. I wished I'd had this information years ago. I see myself in that upper right-hand quadrant in some situations. And I've also seen myself in the upper left-hand quadrant probably 15 years ago. So it's nice to see that paradigm shift for myself. And realizing that I was doing a lot of what you've mentioned, and I know I have a reputation of being a warm demander. I believe that you can do it, and I will help you find the way to do it with my students. The issue I was having towards the end of my career was the restorative justice. There was this separation. Kids were taken away from me to be for the restorative process to be facilitated, but I wasn't a part of it. And I feel like the times where I was able to be a part of it and involved with the kids and the families were the most successful. And I was doing that without the outside experts, I guess. I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was.
Yes, ma'am.
It was encouraging.
Thank you. And you know what? Oftentimes, you know, you have some schools call it conflict resolution, you have some schools call it restorative justice, and some just don't have a name whatsoever. And when you are passionate about the work that you do and the people you serve, and you are able to humanize those people that you serve, regardless of whatever their background may be, you're doing the work. You may just not have had a name for it. It's just who you are, second nature. And so I think it's very important to understand that. I want us to know that this work is necessary. And in many capacities, this work has been done, but it's also evolving, especially in the midst of a pandemic, right? So what do you know, like I'm working on a full district-wide restorative justice plan as a one-woman show. Like, it has been tedious. And I've had some pushback because you have some people who frame a mind as punitive, you know, like, hey, like, let's just send them to alternative school. And that's not what I'm here for. So, but another thing is, you know, all the things I've gone, like, if all of us has been through some type of experience in our life that we may not have understood the reason why we was going through the things we're going through. That's because it was preparing you for where you are now. And so when I get pushback, I don't, you know, other people are like, oh my gosh, Dr. Jones, we're so sorry. I'm like, sorry about what? I'm cute. I'm cool with challenges. That's been my whole life. And so I was built for this. And so I want us all to know that we're built for this. Thank you, Ms. Neal.
I'd like to add one more thing if I could.
And then Williams.
The pandemic disrupted systems that needed to be disrupted. Education and health, I'll just stick with education, being one of them. And going back to normal and it wasn't working before. And so we're at a prime opportunity to shift those things, because the thing that would have disrupted my getting into restorative would have been all the top-down kinds of things and the schedules and the minutes and the testing, and it just wasn't organic. And I guess there was someone on here talking about old school. That was me. I just shut the door and we'd go, you know, fluid what we needed to deal with at the moment. And so, yeah, looking at the system, you know, and then, yeah, 32 kids in a classroom, let's get real. So there's just so much to the system that has to be shifted.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Yes, this is, I kind of agree with what she said earlier, was that this is which was around years ago. When I started my career, we were DLC, dealing with juveniles, and then they changed us to juvenile justice specialists. And basically what that meant, we went from an iron fist to a velvet glove. When I started, it was 45 teenagers on the building with me, one adult. How do you control that? With an iron fist. But the ones who were successful at using iron fist were already using these restorative justice techniques, because it is physically impossible to control 45 young people at one time without understanding them as individuals and working with them as each individual person as for a group of young delinquents. I think when it was introduced to me, I was doing PBS 5 years ago in the department. They were using it in the juvenile jails and the school systems and everyday life. We were reluctant because a lot of people didn't, the name that was put on it and the changes in techniques and functions was terrifying to people. They all take away confinement. How are we going to control them? Well, you got to talk to them. You got to get to know them. You got to find out their value system. It's ways you can still understand their value system. One kid might like basketball more than somebody else. Hey, you don't get to play this week. And understanding that over the years that I worked in is second generational inmates or juveniles, meaning the kid was like, you knew my dad, which is real creepy in that environment. I've had young men come to me, looking at this new generation, they function different, they think different. So we have to go restorative. The iron fist barely worked on us when we was growing up, and we saw the damage that it did. So this restorative approach is not just valuable in schools, but in everyday life. Kids, grandkids, great nephews and nieces, they don't listen the same. They don't react the same. They're a whole different generation. So I think what we're doing here is invaluable just in everyday life, let alone in the school systems and everywhere else that we're trying to reach. So I thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes. So this is the plan. I'm going to send an email out that not necessarily homework. If you have opportunity to take a look at it, that's great. Hopefully you do. But then we'll also be able to have a discussion about a recap. So when we come together tomorrow, we'll recap about what we discussed today. Sometimes questions and concerns and inquiries come up after the training is done for the evening. So I want to make sure I make provision for that. And then also we won't have our quiz until the last day of class, which will be on the 15th. So we'll probably take like the first 30 minutes on the 15th to have a conversation together, and then I'll email everyone the link and you just take the quiz. And then we'll also be able to provide like continual support. So, you know, we have the private Facebook group. We also have the monthly check-ins with everyone who's participating in restorative justice online process, you know, since we pivoted since last year during the pandemic. So it's about maybe 300 of us total. All 300 don't show up at, you know, monthly, but it's been open to 300. It's usually about 45 to 50 of us. And it's beautiful because people have opportunity to network about, you know, how they are implementing and, you know, executing restorative justice in their school districts. We bouncing ideas, people come together like, hey, I'm having a problem with my administrator. Like, have you had a situation like this? So it's just been a beautiful experience, and it's been very organic and authentic and just truly loving. So I'm grateful. But if you do have questions and concerns, everyone has my when I send an email out, you already have my email address. You also will have my contact information. So please feel free to reach out and we will connect tomorrow.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Dr. Jones.
Thank you. Everyone have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Very
Thank
you, Dr.
informative.
Jones.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Too.